مساء الخير أسعد الله مساءكم بكل سعادة والخير. Hello, my name is Maurice Pomerantz. I'm the Senior Director of the NYU Abu Dhabi Institute. I'm also a professor here in the programs of Arab Crossroads and Literature. I want to welcome you to this talk. It's part of our 15th anniversary year season, which is filled with lots of exciting events. Our motto this season is explore, share, and grow. I encourage you all to go out and explore with us at these various events. You can check us out on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and I encourage you to follow us there. And find out what's going on. This month is really packed. We have a series of Ramadan events coming up as well. And March will prove to be no less exciting. But tonight, it is my special honor and privilege to introduce to you Arwa Damon in this remarkable film, Seize the Summit. As many of you know, Ms. Damon is a multi-award-winning and multi-Emmy-award-winning former senior international correspondent for CNN. For more than 17 years, she's covered stories across the Middle East, Asia, Europe, and Africa. Ms. Damon has drawn a focus on the human dimension of global conflicts. She, in particular, won an Emmy for the documentary Return to Mosul, which aired in 2016. Through her intensive work in war zones, Damon witnessed injured children lacking access to medical care they desperately needed. And as a result, she founded the charity Inara in 2015. In 2022, while organizing a Kilimanjaro summit for Inara, she realized the unique opportunity to convey extraordinary stories of survivors of war to a wide audience. Believing in the documentary and documentary form's impact, Damon took a significant step by leaving CNN to pursue and self-fund this project's production and continue telling stories in this new context. And so tonight we'll be watching her film, Seize the Summit, and afterwards we'll have a Q&A with Ms. Damon. So thank you all and welcome, and enjoy. Well, thank you so much. We do have time for some questions. There are microphones. There are folks coming around. All we ask of you is you just identify yourselves and ask a question. That was really an amazing film. I have lots of questions, and we can do one as a warm-up. I mean, I think it was really, how did this idea come to you? I mean, where does a film like this come from? And
I think it was a number of places. So I obviously covered the refugee route of 2015, 2016, and I saw all of that unfolding. And then I'd also covered Ukraine. And actually, what we were trying to do was organize Kilimanjaro for INARA back in 2020.
Okay.
And it didn't work out because of COVID. And so by 2022, when we were trying to put it back on again, Afghanistan had happened, Ukraine had happened, and that was how the thinking around doing the whole expedition to raise awareness about the work that INARA was doing shifted to this bigger message of raising awareness about how war impacts everybody in the same way. And so already the Kilimanjaro expedition moved beyond the Inara idea. And Mustafa and I are friends for a while, and I do mountains. And the minute we kind of shifted away from it being just about Inara's mission to this sort of bigger concept, I saw the documentary. I could see it, and I could see what I hope is sort of the different layers of messages that it can have. And so, yeah, I basically tossed away a fancy career as a senior correspondent, and there you go.
Wow. I'm sure the transition from sort of, I think you say, sort of covering the news, watching to doing is quite a big difference. In this film, you're sort of a presence there with
I mean,
The monk, I know the monk.
no, but not that. I mean it more like, in some ways, your presence there, you're there with this group. There's clearly a lot of emotion going through the film, and it does have that kind of that sense that we're kind of watching, but we're part of it. Tell us a little bit about that experience. And I mean, some of the shots of the film are amazing. So you're kind of in these like almost unreal land, sort of.
And the
sites around,
juxtaposition.
and at the same time, you're kind of in this intimate space. So it's kind of interesting. The contrast to that really works well and is really interesting. So
yeah, and then there's like, the whole juxtaposition between, everything that they've been through and
Yes.
kind of the imagery that makes up the narrative of their lives and being on the mountain and the way that it kind of just opened them up to everything. And I was obviously very fortunate because, so most of what we shot, it was just me and Cameron Williams. So that was all of his visuals. And then on the mountain, we had Leonardo, who joined us as second camera.
Okay.
And they're both, very, very experienced. And Leo has done a lot of mountains. And, I knew the feel I wanted to have for the documentary. I wanted it to be very intimate. I wanted those close-up shots, but I also wanted it to be very rough. So, like, no tripods were used,
Right.
no shots were reset up, and that sort of thing. We did have a drone, but it crashed, which is why you don't have a beautiful drone shot of, the summit itself, because the drone had crashed like 6 hours earlier. Oops, it happens. And I think for me, like, what I enjoyed the most about it was those moments where they smile and laugh. Because I knew them so well.
Yes.
And it was so crazy, too, to me, because I could go to Ukraine and see Tanya's mother. I could go to Afghanistan and find Shaqaiq's father's grave. Like, I could go into their life that they couldn't access anymore.
Wow.
And then the way that they kind of bonded and the way they talk about things together, it's sort of like, it's dark, but it's a bit humorous, and
Right.
the way that their whole relationship
Right.
unfolded together, yeah.
Wow, yeah, you can definitely see the chemistry kind of emerging from this kind of, shared experience, but also this kind of other shared depth of kind of challenges, that kind of repeated the sense that there were sort of other much greater mountains that they've all climbed before. It's a nice kind of, a sense. I wonder what it is about, I had been thinking actually, wonder what it is about sort of mountains and sort of as spaces to kind of reflect, maybe as a distance, maybe there's stillness, something about that.
It's the being in nature, and then so when you're on an experience that's that intense, it forces you to go in.
Yeah.
And when you go in that way, you're forced to confront things that, you didn't know
Right.
you had, because it kind of forces you to think about it. And we
Yes.
saw that the most
Absolutely.
obviously, with Safa, who thought that she had gotten over her whole experience of being burned,
Right.
but that actually she hadn't. And it ended up being the Kilimanjaro experience that, brought that whole thing back up for her.
That's so interesting. I think that sense of almost, one thing I noticed in the film was some of the footage you had, the reenactment, but also I think some of the, the kind of intense war footage that you have juxtaposed with the kind of stillness of walking up the mountain it's really interesting, we feel the tension as viewers, that kind of the being in these kind of, the shaky camera, the kind of sense that war is just this, thing
part of
that's
the camera shaking
indescribable.
was also it was exhausting, right?
Yeah, right.
But
No, I mean the sort of splicing in the earlier footage.
It worked,
yeah,
though.
It's
It
kind of
worked with the
interesting.
whole feel, yeah.
Yes. We don't want to monopolize. I see a hand there. Great.
Thank you very much. My question goes a bit beyond the film, but obviously you are looking at individual war stories of individuals, and as we see lots of them these days on TV, and also you've been a journalist for a long time. Of course, you're no longer with CNN, I understand. So I'm wondering how, as a journalist, the coverage of individual stories of individuals who suffer, who, were wounded or lost loved ones, how this coverage has changed, let's say, in the last few years. After all, we have, unfortunately, we have a long period we've had a long period of horrific wars, which is still ongoing, as we know. So I'm wondering, I wanted to have your thoughts on that, because it's something that it actually does intrigue me.
I think it's changed profoundly. I think it's very clear right now that the media no longer controls how a story is told, and that social media has given people more agency over how their own story is told. And I think, we see that obviously very, very clearly right now. That's not to say that that negates, the role that journalists play. It's a very different, perspective. It's a very different way of presenting the news. But what we do see now is that, people control more of how their story is told, and how war is able to directly impact them in a way. It's not just about journalists and networks and media outlets that are telling the people's story. It's each person gets to tell their own story right now. And that has a very, profound message of its own, too.
Very interesting. Thank you.
I have a question about the film. Back to the film, Arwa and Farah.
Hi, Kim.
How are you? How did you pick the characters? I mean, all of them were just very different, and I loved it, and I understand how you picked them from each different war. But did you pre-interview them? Did you find them? Did you ask them if they wanted to? I mean, it's not like asking them to be on a reality show and sit in a chair. And I'm glad you didn't ask me to go. But nonetheless, I mean, how did you pick them? Because they all seem to sort of gel together really well.
Yeah, that was luck. And look, you know what this is like, right? Like, you go out and you have 4 characters and you're convinced that, all 4 of them can't be amazing, right? Like, that doesn't happen. So Safa and Adnan, I'd actually known for years. They were part of the original INADA trip that was meant to happen in 2020. And then Shaqaiq took me about 2 months to track down, because originally, right after Afghanistan started, I was originally looking for someone who had just fled then after the Taliban took back over Kabul. But then logistics get in the way, because anyone who had fled that recently didn't yet have their legal paperwork to be able to travel out of whatever country they had taken refuge in. And then I heard through a journalist friend about Shaqaiq's mother. And I reached out to Shaqaiq's mother asking if she knew anyone who was of the younger generation who would be willing to do this. And she says, oh, well, I have my daughter. And that's how I met her. Tanya took a while also to track down, because Ukraine was so fresh that a lot of people who I reached out to, completely and totally understandably, just didn't really have the headspace to even begin to consider something like this, because by the time when we did this, I think we were only on month 4 of what had happened in Ukraine. And that's how we got Tanya on board. But then I remember also, so I go and I was filming with Adnan first, and he's amazing. And I'm like, well, okay, that's great, And then I go and I film with Tanya, and I'm like, wow, she's amazing. And then I'm like, well, the other 2 have to be duds, right? Like, you're not, and then I go and I film with Shaqaiq, and I'm like, damn, like, this girl is incredible. And then Safa too, obviously, and I was like, wow. But no, I didn't know how they were gonna gel together at all, or if they were even gonna get along. And then obviously there was like the language barriers, and everything had to go through translators and whatnot. And by the way, just while I have the microphone, I just want to also say, like, this was a crazy idea to begin with. It was my first rodeo as a documentarian, or whatever I get to call myself right now. And I just want to say, like, Rasha, our executive producer, is here, and you jumped on my crazy train with me. So, and Paul also, who did our graphics, is here somewhere too. So thank you for that support.
I saw some.
There's one right
Okay, right there. Right there, and then I saw one up there.
And then there's there.
Yep,
And
right
there's
there.
there. And there's just.
There we go.
Thank you for the commentary. It's not a question, but something that I was really touched by is that when Shagayag and Tanya had this talk, and Shagayag was telling her, and it's so sad to hear her saying it's new for you, but we got used to it. I was born in this. It's like basically all her life she lived with war. But she was trying to comfort her, but just to hear that, this narrative, and to tell someone it's hard for you because it's new for you. So I was very touched by that. And then when I saw your tears, I mean, it's not the first time, you saw it many times, and still you're touched and moved by it. So this is just, I wanted to...
Yeah, that's my favorite moment, actually, in the whole film.
Yeah. It's so sad to get used to war.
I saw one back there.
Thank you. Thank you, Arwa, and your team. Very moving. I wondered if you could just bring us up to date with how the four are doing post their trip to Kilimanjaro. How has it impacted on their lives since, and what changes has it brought about?
So Adnan, if any of you are on Instagram, I highly suggest you follow him. He's like ADNO.9 or something. The guy's doing like kind of like Iron Man stuff. I mean, no, seriously, he's like, I don't know. He's going for it. And he has doubled, like he was already had this, Paralympics goal in his head, but he has doubled down on that to a level that is just, I mean, when you see what he looks like now and you look at what he looks like in the film he looks scrawny all of a sudden. So he's really, really gone for it. Safa, unfortunately, so she was doing very well afterwards and actually got back from Kilimanjaro and was messaging me and telling me about how, at university, she began going to the cafeteria for the first time and, starting to speak to people and interact with people, and it was going really well for her, but then her family couldn't afford to send her anymore. So she's had to drop out. She had to drop out last semester. Separately, I'm trying to help figure that out. Shaqaiq got a cat. She actually, it was an adjustment for her to come off Kilimanjaro and go back to her life, in Germany, because she really wanted to stay in forward motion. So it was a bit more of a balance for her to try to figure that out. And then obviously she still has this very, deep desire. But she messaged the group the other day, actually saying how, she would think back on the experience and redraw strength from it when she felt that she was down. Tanya is still in Italy, has not been able to go back to Ukraine, and Kharkiv and the village close to Kharkiv, where her mom are part of this whole renewed effort of bombardment. But she's working, she's trying, but she's still very, obviously stuck in this life of limbo where, you're desperate to go back home, but you kind of try to put up a few building blocks in the place that you find yourself.
Thank you. I see one question there, and then...
Hi, Arwa. I wanted to just ask how easy it was to convince them to do this in the first place. The fact that, they're being followed by cameras, the fact that it's a very intimate moment, were they down to do it as soon as you asked, or did it take some convincing,
They were pretty much good with it.
Yeah.
They were like, okay, this is crazy. But yeah, all right, let's do it. Especially Adnan, like he's a bit of a celebrity in this town that he's from. And so we were walking around with him, and he's like going in his wheelchair, and I swear he moves so fast in that thing, I couldn't keep up. And, he's telling everyone I'm going to Kilimanjaro, and they're all like, you're insane. And, he was kind of loving it. And then Shaqaiq's friends were making fun of her for agreeing to go because Shaqaiq, as she herself said it, she goes, I'm so lazy, the supermarket is 10 minutes from my house and I take the train. Like, that's how, and I'm like, you need, like, and we gave them, we pre-provided the hiking boots, and we gave them, like, the training, and, you need to start blah, blah, you need to break your boots in and this and that. And she didn't even bother. Like, she got up that mountain on sheer will alone. I think Tanya was very quick to jump on board because I think she recognized that it was going to get her out of her own head. And I mean, for Safa, it was, she'd never been on a plane before. The first time she ever traveled was when she left Syria to flee to Lebanon. And so that was, it was her first experience on a plane. It was her first. And then it was the whole, like, there's moments that obviously don't make it into the documentary, right? But then when we came back down off the mountain, we all went on safari.
Oh.
And, seeing them see all of that. Like, I love giving people a first, and I also love having firsts, and then seeing them, especially knowing their backstory, having all of these firsts. It was beautiful.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you for coming. Could I ask one more?
Yeah, of course.
So,
Of course you can. You're the boss.
Okay, well, so what's next? Is it,
for me?
For you?
Oh,
yes.
good Lord. I have no idea. No, I'm very bad at planning. No, to be in all fairness, actually, I do have a couple of ideas that I'm kind of percolating. And my intent was to try to get this kind of more on its way because we finished the edit in September, but I still move in the journalism and in the humanitarian space. And, when Gaza started, everything else kind of just took a back seat. So we're just starting now with this whole process of trying to, get this out. Yeah. And I need to, I don't know if I'll do another documentary though.
Okay.
We'll see.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
Thank
okay.
you.
Bye-bye.